All right. We are now live, and Mike is back this week after being out. And we have a special guest, Dylan, here. Dylan's our head of
Hello.
product, and he's going to be talking to us about all things new pricing model. But before we jump into that, how are y'all doing? How's your week been?
I'm doing good. The week has been busy and exciting, doing all the pricing announcements, that sort of thing. Yeah, doing good.
Nice. How about you, Mike?
I'm doing well. End of a sprint, so we got trying to get stuff merged, but that's felt very good. And we've had a bunch of really interesting customer interactions this week that felt fun and moving forward-ish. So yeah, great stuff. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I feel like this was a very productive sprint, and especially when the sprint feels especially productive, then the end of sprint is fun because you like look at the board and you're like, oh, we did a bunch of stuff, Also, we got a new coworker this week, which was super exciting. That's Trond for you listeners at home, and Tron's working on our front end, but really has skills up and down the stack, like most folks at Goliath. So it's already been super fun to have him on board, and Dylan and I have had a bunch of fun doing onboarding stuff with him. So yeah, it's I think growing the team is like the most exciting thing that can happen in a week. So that was definitely the highlight for me. I'm a little tired though, but Mike, you were on vacation last week. So are you feeling rejuvenated and ready to go?
I was. Now I'm feeling hit by a bus. No.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. I was off for a week and I didn't really check email or anything. And so the amount of time spent catching up on Slack and email was a little jarring on Monday. But, since we plan our sprints pretty well, I think. So having missed the first half of the sprint, I had a lighter set on the second half, and you guys didn't miss me. So it was good.
I actually did miss you, Mike, because while you were out, I decided to pretend to be a firmware developer and clone one of your repos where you got Zephyr and Goliath up and running on this thing.
Oh yeah.
The screen won't turn on, and it seems like the flash isn't mounted. That's probably just me not knowing what I'm doing. But I was like, the week that Mike is out, I try to use his stuff. So I'll be pinging you about that at some point once I get back to my side quest hacking on things.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing it. That was one of my holiday hours exploration things, and it was a nice little piece of kit. So it'd be nice to have someone else take advantage of that too.
Awesome. Yeah. Love to hear it. I did mention in the post that went out a few minutes ago that our primary purpose here is to recap Dune 2, but we'll save the most important thing for the end and talk about the
watching.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll give a spoilers disclaimer later, so that folks can listen, and then if they haven't seen it, then they'll get that. But really, what we're here for today is we had a big pricing announcement on Tuesday. The headline is that we've made device management free for individual developers, and we've moved to a mostly usage-based pricing model. And I say mostly because it's a combination of tiers and usage, and Dylan's going to get more into that. But before we talk about like the literal technicalities of the new pricing model, Dylan, I wonder if you could this is something that you kind of like came into Goliath with, like this ethos about how you wanted our product to be structured, I feel like, and how pricing kind of like fell out of that vision. And I was curious if you could just kind of like talk about maybe some of the motivation for making the pricing change before we get into literally how it looks.
Sure. By the way, folks in the biz call our pricing model a hybrid pricing model, where you have the teams tier costs like a flat fee, and then there's the usage-based amount.
We're the Prius of pricing models over here. So
indeed. Yeah. The announcement was like new pricing. But The actual price, the actual per megabyte price in a lot of our services was the thing that I was thinking about the least, and almost like those prices will iterate over time, right? But really, it was about aligning our pricing, and I guess you could call this our packaging our products, or pricing our products in such a way that they're packaged with how we're thinking about Goliath as a set of features and as a set of products. So you'll see if you look at our pricing page, there's now kind of like a delineation between a category of features, which we'll hope to explain more and more about how we're thinking about building things at Goliath. But there's really 3 different categories of product feature sets. One is device management, which you just mentioned is the piece that we're making free for individual developers. But that includes things like over-the-air software updates, logging, just being able to see in a dashboard, is your device online or offline? It's basically the set of features that every single IoT device on the planet needs to have to operate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another category of features that we're calling data routing, which the most common use case there is sensor data ingestion. So you have an IoT device out in the world. I'm using my M2 stack guy here. This is an environmental sensor, but I'm gonna have many little sensors attached. Mike, I am glad you have decided to participate in Aloha Friday.
Yeah, Sam called me out. I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation.
Dylan willed this into existence today, so
we can talk more about Aloha Friday once I finish this thought.
For sure.
But data routing is the other category of features you'll see next, both in our documentation. We've structured our documentation as device management, data routing, and application services. Data routing is about getting data from your devices, from the physical world, oftentimes, turning that digital and then sending that up to the cloud via Goliath, and then doing stuff with it, and then getting it ultimately to your end destination where your applications can make use of it. And that's a whole set of features that not every IoT device in the world necessarily needs, which I guess is how we're thinking about it, is like an add-on. Like, you don't necessarily need this for every device on the planet, but many do, and it's significant amount of value that Goliath offers. So there's a price associated with the amount of data that you send through Goliath. And then the third category is application services. So things like our LightDB stream, which is a time series database that you can use without having to go set up a whole bunch of infrastructure and create database tables. It just kind of magically takes your sensor readings and stores them and allows you to query them and that sort of thing, which is about making you as a person building an IoT product move faster.
Yeah. So on the usage-based pricing component of it, can you give some examples maybe of like maybe not specific customers, but customer use cases that would use the data routing capabilities, and maybe how like our new pricing structure accommodates some of those better than it would have in the past?
Sure. Yeah. I guess maybe I'll start with how it was in the past. I don't know if that was clear. Previously, Goliath priced basically per device per month, a flat fee. Listed on our website was $1.50 per device per month. We oftentimes we later decided to make that $1 per device per month. Most IoT platform companies, device management companies out there charge the same way. They charge based on number of devices connected. So if you have 1,000 devices connected, that's likely going to cost you $1,000 per month for that fleet, no matter what features you use, how much data you send, which particularly for Goliath, because we focus on microcontroller based devices, low power cellular connected devices that are offline for long periods of time, paying effectively $12 a year for a device that you may or may not send an update to was oftentimes incompatible with some of our customers' business models. These are devices like a sensor that is in a trash can monitoring if trash has been put in that trash can. And some of the trash cans are in like rural areas or like off the beaten path where it's not very often that they get filled up. So they don't send readings that often. They go back to sleep for periods of time. So if the pricing was like centered around an average use case, on average, we see various different devices in our platform's behavior profiles being something like, I'll send a sensor reading every 10 minutes. And that sensor reading is measured in bytes. Some of our customers have SIM cellular data plans that have only 10 megabytes for 10 years. So they use 1 megabyte a year, which means layering on $1 per device per month on top of that is just like impossible. So we think that we've opened up a lot more use cases and enabled a lot more folks to just have OTA, have logs as a thing that they can use without having to freak out about the expenditure of having a feature that you may not deploy an update because that update would burn through your cellular bill effectively, or it's there for when you have an emergency, security, vulnerability, anything like that.
I really liked watching you work through the pricing over time because we, of course, got the backroom view of how it developed. And I thought it was really cool how, I guess I don't have direct knowledge of this, but it seems like you were taking a lot of customer feedback on things like, I remember a customer saying, I'm going to test a device and then I'm going to put it in a box and it's going to sit on a shelf for who knows how long before a customer buys it and starts using that. Do I need to pay per month for that to be on there? And the thing is, like, it's not really costing Golioth any money for that device to be sitting on the shelf. So like, that's a great case where this pricing really embraces and like enables a company to choose Golioth and know that they're going, you know, the payment that they're going to be making is going to be because they're using their devices. Did you have other like edge cases, like out of the ordinary ones that you think this embraces a little bit better?
Yeah. That one in particular is very interesting and a hard problem to solve. There's like several times when a device could be just sitting idle or offline or not in use for many different reasons. And paying for a device while it's not being used is incompatible with different business models for different reasons. We actually should have a separate topic, like in a different live stream about IoT business models, because it's kind of interesting. But the first and foremost, most common reason a device is sitting in a box is because you just manufactured it. And then you put it in a box and it sits in a warehouse until it gets sent out into the world. And the way a lot of one device management IoT platform company I know of in particular handles this is they do something called basically like a manufacturing grace period where you just don't have to pay for that device for 3 months. But if your device sits in a box for 3 months, then, well, if it's sitting in the box for 6 months, you still have to pay for it after like that grace period ends, which is, it's like, because it's hard on a per device per month fee basis to accommodate that, there's just like hacks put into contracts basically. But one that's interesting is seasonal businesses. Smart lighting for holidays or festivals and things like that. Christmas lights that are internet connected. Chicago, actually, there's a website you can go to request all the buildings to be a different color. I forget what the website is, but like this, the Willis Tower and then like a lot of different buildings throughout the city of Chicago have lights that change color. Like the top of the spear on the Willis Tower is like pink sometimes for like different events. And usually it's like a holiday or something like that. But there's a website you can go to and request the color to change, and then you pay a fee, I think, and then the color gets changed throughout the city. A use case like that, but for like Christmas time, all those smart lights get put into a warehouse off season, and then do you just pay for those the whole time, or do you pay for them when you use them? There's some companies like in the medical field where a patient who's maybe having their heart problem where they need to have a remote patient monitor attached. Not attached. They need to take home a remote patient monitor and monitor their vitals. They'll have that device for a week or a month and then bring it back, and then it'll get put in the box at the hospital. So there's a lot of cases around that, just like the device not being used, which is interesting.
That's a really good one too, the hospital one, because I know I have friends who work in medical device field, and they are often gravitating toward like cellular connected, because it is things that go to different patients, like get checked. I at one point went to the doctor and they're like, we might get you a heart monitor, and like it didn't end up needing it, but they were going to check it out to me, and I'm sure that it was at someone else, and that's a very good use case.
Something that's interesting too is Golioth as a effectively infrastructure provider. We are never usually selling to the end user of the IoT product. And a lot of times, like, our business is not just B2B, it's B2B to B to B to B to C, something like that. Which means our customers, the way they pay us is then bound to like the way they pay, or their customer pays them, and on and on. And I recall working with a lot of clinical trial, like medical device companies. They would sign these like 5-year plus contracts for an allotment of remote patient monitoring devices effectively. And then the sponsor of that clinical study is a pharmaceutical company. They effectively pay up front for like the hardware and get like 5,000 devices put into a warehouse for 5 years, or 50,000 devices, or however many is in that study. And then the billing for like the participant or the patient in that study doesn't happen until like potentially years later. So there's like so many different delays that can happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like the thing that fits like really well in my mind is that it feels like a pricing model in which we're passing savings on to our customers, right? You mentioned before, it's not like a huge cost to us for a entry in a database to exist for a device. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense, I guess, both from a UX perspective, for them to have to like go in and disable a device or delete a device because they're not using it presently, right? That's operational overhead that serves no value for anyone. And then secondly, if they don't need to send a lot of data, or maybe they'll adapt over time how much data they're sending, right? That's reducing our costs and passing that along to them. And it incentivizes optimization, which a lot of times they are already incentivized to do. If they're, for instance, using a cellular connection, if they optimize their payloads, right? So they use a format maybe that's more concise, or they send less data, or they batch data or something like that. That's going to drive down costs all the way across the chain. And I personally, like, from an engineering perspective, really like that engineering effort and ingenuity leads to cost savings for the customer. That's like a really big like tenet of a well-designed product to me.
Yeah. And summarizing that a little bit, like allowing our customers to be in control of their costs is pretty important. It's like we're charging based on how much data you send through Golioth and out of Golioth, and I think it's aligned pretty well too in like what costs us money. Like you said, it's doesn't really cost us anything to have a line entry in a database. Technically, it does cost us some to have like devices connected to Golioth and like constantly observing. We're choosing not to charge for that. Like the unlimited device connections is what we're pitching. But egress data, like sending a bunch of OTA downloads to devices or sending data out to InfluxDB, for us is or for anyone running software on the internet, egress data is like usually what's the most expensive. So I like to think that we're aligned there.
And stuff I personally like about the new pricing plan is like you preserved the ability to do like a lot of OTA downloads before you hit that pricing tier. So like there's a big chunk. How much data is included?
1
for OTA?
gigabyte per month, which
is a ton. Yeah.
If you are not in working with microcontrollers every day, it might not sound like a lot, but it actually is a lot. Because, for example, like an OTA update for an iPhone is like over a gigabyte for one phone to download. But
I figure it's like 2,000 device OTAs per month are included. Like that's back of the envelope sort of thing. I mean, the other thing I really like is kind of Goliath values the ability to prototype on the same platform you're going to go to production with. And this pricing seems to have really preserved that like development tier without putting barriers in front of you.
Yeah, I think that is very accurate. We have a Thingy 91 demo with a pre-built binary, and I think the OTA for that, you know, I'm gonna stop talking about this for a minute. My Thingy 91. If anyone knows what I should do, please tell me in the chat. I need to figure out how to take it apart because if you can see, there's coffee floating around in the battery area.
I thought that was the lithium battery leak or something. I was like, get it out of your house.
30 minutes ago, I spilled coffee over my entire desk while I was on a call with Sam, our firmware lead, and it went inside my Thingy 91. I don't know how to take this plastic off. I haven't spent enough time, though, because it was on
There's
a call.
There's just a clip that you can pry over with your thumb, and everything comes out.
Perfect. But anyway, it's like that OTA is 300 kilobytes, right? Something like that.
And 360 or something.
Like that's,
we've been adding features.
some devices will be more than that, obviously, but like usually it's under 1 megabyte, which means 1,000 devices could run on Goliath effectively for free.
Yeah, and I feel like that. There are many memes of IoT, primarily around security and reliability. And one of the things I know that we chat about kind of like leading up to the pricing launch is that, and you kind of alluded to it already earlier, is that like you should not be you should not be compromising either one of those things because of cost, right? And if we are a platform that is forcing our customers to do that, then we are contributing to like we're contributing to the meme of IoT, right? And so I think that's like a really big tenet of us. Like we can't really say that we are, creating a paradigm shift in this industry if our pricing model is like encouraging, disincentivizing doing the right thing. So I feel like, obviously from like a business and technical perspective, there are advantages here, but there's also like a values correlation to like how we view ourselves as an organization, what we say, we stand for. And I think it would be pretty hard to like work here, right? If we were actively going against the things we kind of like pitch.
Yeah. And I personally gravitate towards working at companies building platforms that enable other people to build things. It's just like where I have landed in my career. And I really enjoy seeing like new ideas and new products created on top of our system. And I think the more that we can do to enable that, including removing the cost barrier, is just a great thing and is one of the reasons why I want to work at a company like Goliath.
One of the things that I was thinking about this week, because there's been, I won't name companies by name, but there's been some chatter about like free tiers being about like driving growth, right, for VC funded businesses, and then like people pull the rug out from under you, right?
Hmm.
One of the things that I was kind of trying to be like intellectually honest about our model, right? And comparing it to others and being like, is that what we're doing here? Right? Because like we should be thinking about that. And the fact of the matter is we are a venture backed business and we are trying to grow. And so I was trying to kind of like think about that. One of the things that I feel like differentiates us, and honestly, like I'm still thinking about it, right? And I think we should always be thinking about it. But one of the things that differentiates us a little bit is whether we're going to have a lot of like folks that don't ever get out of the free tier, right? The issue that with those models is when you have a huge customer base all on the free tier, and so you're sinking your profits there. I don't feel like that's something that's modeled. Like we don't think that is a likely outcome for us, in part because like it's a little bit different to have a fleet of devices than it is to have like a web app that you're running, right? And you just need like a storage provider or something like that. But I am one of the things I want to be cognizant of, and I'm curious if you all have thoughts on this, is like continuing to encourage that like individual hobbyist development kind of flow, while also making sure that we don't end up with like a ton of customers who are all in the free tier and none paying us any money. And I think some of that goes into the limits that we talked about there. But another part that goes into it is like one large customer can actually offset a ton of free tier customers for us, because of the size of fleets, as opposed to like we could have a bunch of free tier folks and one large customer that made up for it all. Whereas some of these other companies are going to have a bunch of free tier folks and then a bunch of like folks that are just above the free tier. And that doesn't have the same offsetting qualities. So anyway, I was curious how y'all think about that.
I have thoughts, but I could talk for a really long time. So curious if Mike,
you're the guest, so you can talk.
Something that's really interesting. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, you go. I was going to give you a chance to think, but it sounds like you got it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different tracks I can go on. The first one is many startups build their entire business and fundraising story on getting a whole bunch of free users and monetizing them. Golioth, however, I think is doing like exactly the opposite. We are, to be clear, an enterprise, production grade, serious engineer platform first and foremost. And we have large customers that use our product to manage their fleets in production scenarios. We also have free tier for if you want to use it. And some of the free tier is almost like a side effect of the focus on large scale enterprise production fleets of devices. Because if you think about, for example, 1 gigabyte per device per month for free to a large fleet of devices is a small chunk. It's a nice chunk to have, but it's actually kind of a small chunk if you think about a fleet of 100,000 devices getting an update. But the way, if you go back to how we've structured our product of device management, data routing services, application services, we're now as a company incentivized to continue to improve and focus on adding more value add features that earn us revenue. That's the end of that thought. Next thought is device management as a industry and as a subset of Golioth's product offering. There's a huge amount of I don't even know how many companies offer device management. There's at least thousands. I have worked at 3. This is my third. Most charge on a per device per month basis for device management. Device management is a thing that should exist for every IoT device that you need. It's like a requirement for every IoT device. It's like the product requirements for shipping the thing. If you go to a very large vendor and say, I'm going to deploy 10,000 devices, 100,000 devices, you'll likely get a price back from that vendor that's something like 10 cents per device per month. If you go to medium-sized vendors or you come with a medium-sized fleet, you'll get like $2, $3 per device per month. But as you scale, you go to negotiate and then continues lowering down. So if you start at $3 per device per month for 50 devices, and then for 100,000, you go to 10 cents per device per month, why don't we just stop wasting time on negotiating that price and just make it zero? Then with our large enterprise customers, we can talk about all the other stuff that we do that makes you go faster, get to market faster, like add more features into your product that you would have to build yourself otherwise. That's why I as long as I'm here at Goliath, like it could be different if someone else is the one making the product decisions. But that's why I don't think we will rug pull our free users.
How about you, Mike?
Yeah. So one thing that I take issue with is like thinking about the free tier as the hobby tier. Like I think a lot of times that you have firmware engineers who just want to learn new platforms and try out new platforms and see if it's a tool to add to their tool bag, and having a free tier there that is not limiting really in any way. If it's a single engineer trying something out for the first time, like you can get a ton of devices up and running, sending a ton of data, and you have to work to go past any of those usage bases on just like a validating sort of thing. And I think that's really important because you have traditionally it's been really hard to get into the IoT hardware field. Like you have to be putting out large fleets. It's very labor and cost intensive. And I think the thing that we're moving towards is more of a democratization of companies being able to put out hardware IoT devices. So smaller numbers of fleets, still significant numbers, but not always on the enterprise level. And so those companies, like we do well if those companies do well. So if they can start and have X number, 100 devices, 1,000 devices that are still under those limits, if they are successful and they grow, you would think they're going to have revenue. And it makes sense that like we were there when you were growing, help us with a share of your revenue. Like I think that all seems very fair and like a good way to go about doing it. So I really like that. I think from the hobbyist side of it, like how many devices can a hobbyist possibly put on the platform?
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. I suppose if you're doing virtual devices or something, but when you're talking about hardware devices, like this is really set up to be this onboard ramp for an enterprise grade product that you can start a small business on and grow it to an empire.
One of the things that brings to mind for me, which has been somewhat educational for me since joining Goliath, is that it's not totally unique to businesses that have a hardware component, but it certainly is more prevalent, is that you partner with a development shop or a some sort of on some sort of contract basis to produce the hardware, and then you as the company continue to operate that service for the hardware, right? You build an application on top of it, a product on top of it, and you may have subsequent revisions of that product, but maybe that's done. It's not done in-house. And one of the things it makes me think of is when I was in college, in some of our computer science classes, we use cloud services for a variety of things, and AWS would always give us like huge credits, right? Because they're like, okay, well, if we have these students learning how to use AWS when they're in college, they're going to go out into the workforce, right, and advocate for it and say, I know how to use this, let's just use it, etc. And that has a kind of a flywheel effect on it. One of the things that we have is not only like folks getting experience with Goliath and knowing how to use it, like going out into wherever they work, viewing that as more like a permanent thing. We have partners who can develop and test Goliath out and build their skill sets, like you're saying, and work with a lot of different customers. So it's not just like that one person who's at one customer at a time or one company at a time. We could have, one partner or one individual even that hones their skills on Goliath and, is regularly bringing more people to the platform because of that model, which I think is a little bit unique to maybe like your typical like SaaS business or something like that.
Yeah. I also disagree with the word hobbyist.
I take it back.
Oh no,
Dan,
it's not a
Dan,
it's not a dig on you.
Dan, when you were here in Chicago,
Mhm.
whenever that was, and there was a tornado that almost like killed us during our offsite. Somehow we were on the topic of like hobbies, right? And I said that my hobby was scheming. Most things that I do have capitalism infused into them. So if I sign up for a lot of like free developer products, because usually I'm working on like an idea for a startup, not because I'm trying to. Well, I think some of the stuff I am doing right now is kind of hobby. I'm trying to monitor like plants. But it is infused with capitalism because my wife is opening a plant business. So I've turned my entire office into a greenhouse that's going to be IoT monitored and potentially automated. But
we're going to have a show on that. Don't worry, folks.
Usually the first thing I do when I'm going to start a hobby project is to buy a domain name. And then I create the brand.
And then done, right? And then you're done.
Usually I go and like talk to ChatGPT now. To ask it about like what good names for this, what are like brandable names. Pretend you are a brand expert and do brand research for me and create a brand. And then I make a website and then I sign up for a bunch of services like Heroku or back in the day or Vercel now. Set up CI environment for my empty Node.js project, and then I stop. But
you are well beyond most folks who buy the domain and then that took up their 30-minute allotment for the weekend, and now it's lost forever.
But the point is enabling folks to like be entrepreneurs and start things without having to. Like putting in a credit card for $20 a month, $100 a month is very difficult for an individual with an idea. To Golioth, to a company that's thinking in the millions of dollars, that $100 from that one individual who has that idea is not material to the business. So why should they have to have that financial like burden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I remember a few discussions where you were kind of like talking about how you put your credit card into like all sorts of different platforms, and I was like, that's really interesting because you literally have to like move heaven and earth for me to put my credit card into a platform. Which we have different roles in the company, so maybe that's an appropriate dichotomy there. But I
did get burned by that once. It may still burn me. I have it's an annual bill. I put in my personal credit. I put my personal credit card into Loom, the video like streaming thing. It was during a period of time where I was unemployed. So when I'm unemployed, I'm not usually searching for a job. I'm trying to like start something.
Yeah.
So I'll put my personal credit card in a bunch of things to like get the thing to look like a real company. And I was recording Loom videos and like embedding them on a website. And I think I used an email address to one of those domains that I bought that has since expired, and I can't log into that Loom account, and I get a charge still. I think it's done. So I contacted support. I'm like, I'm being charged for this thing. I don't know what it is. Can you like cancel it? And I might actually have canceled that card. But I now have an LLC with a business credit card and all that stuff. So it's like not quite the same as like putting my personal card into stuff.
Scheming Incorporated is the name of your LLC, right?
No.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think it's organized really well right now, where we have like the upgrade path is really clear, right? You start out, you don't have to put in your credit card. You can stay an individual, put in your credit card, have a little bit of usage. Soon some more features around that. You can view your usage in real time right now, though, which is really nice. And we bill monthly. And then you can, go on from there and that sort of thing. So it feels like that our not just our literal platform tiers, but like our tiers of how much it's going to cost you map really well to the like stratification of businesses that we have on the platform. But I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback too. And, as a call to action for anyone watching this, if you're hearing about this pricing model and you're saying, I don't think this works for me, then reach out to us because it is, iterative, and we're always trying to work with folks because we do believe that, our job is to enable you to build whatever you're going to build. Related to that, being able to know whether our pricing model fits. One of the things that's maybe could be considered a negative about our new pricing model is I think there is more cognitive overhead, perhaps, for the customer, right? We had an extremely predictable pricing model before by saying, it's something like X number of dollars per device. And you say, I know how many devices I'm going to have. I know how much it's going to cost. A lot of times that was a lot of money. And so people said, well, that's not going to work for me. So that's, why we take some of the trade-offs here. But Dylan, do you have any thoughts around how we want to make it easier for folks to be able to understand how much it's going to cost? And I think like maybe the first reason is that, or the first way is that we do give you that free tier so you can measure, right? You can just use it and see. But what are some other ideas that we have coming forward here?
Yeah, you're right. It is currently now more complicated to actually calculate what your bill would be in, say, you deployed a couple hundred or 1,000 devices, because we have like DB Stream, and that has a price. We have output streams that has a price. We have OTA that has a price after you pass the 1 gigabyte of free usage logs. So you have to take into consideration all these different features you might be using, and then estimate how your device is going to behave to figure out the price. The first thing we can do today is if you talk to us. We've got some very messy spreadsheets that we can plug. You can talk. We'll ask you some questions and we can plug them in, and then we can let you know roughly what it's going to cost. But we're hoping to make that into a little bit more polished form, and then give that to our users as well, either in the form of a calculator on our website or something in that usage page within the console at a certain point, so that you can start to forecast. Right now you can view your usage, but then you have to go, okay, I use this much this day, and then this much this day, and then times 30 days in a month, and there's my bill. So we're hoping to enhance that page a little bit to show kind of where you're at now, and then what it would be at the end of the month, and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the things we have coming there. But like you said, definitely reach out to us because we can give some good estimates there. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's good to also go back to one of Dylan's very first comments, which is where it gives the customer the ability to control their costs. Because before, if you wanted to control your costs, you had to like pull devices out of the field. Like that's not a thing, right? And so now, you can start a small fleet and not really think about your data usage. And then as you scale up and you have more bandwidth and more employees, then you could task them with making your usage more lean and mean and control your costs that way. And like, that sounds very natural to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually thinking about a sort of like template, whether it's like in our reference designs or something like that, about like with our settings that we use for a lot of things, like, for instance, like how often something is sending data or something like that, or perhaps like a sampling rate of the data you're sending, like developing kind of like a ready-made scheme for like sort of like log levels, where you have like info, debug, warn, error, etc. Like having that for your streaming data as well, and basically saying like, give me more frequently, less frequently, etc. And kind of like starting to work with folks for them to at least have a basic kind of like leveling system for reducing their costs, because it would be really nice. You can set settings at the global level, and so you could just have your whole fleet be like, yep, crank down the cost a little bit, we're getting close to our billing limit for the month or something like that.
There's a comment in the chat from Timon that says it is scary to have a pure usage-based model, put your credit card in, and then suddenly you get a surprise bill because your device was misbehaving. So that's something we hope to solve as well. As always, talk to us if you have that happen. We're humans that you can talk to, and we have feelings and can understand that. And if you get a surprise bill, then we'll do what we can to potentially. But we're working on actually having some way to define caps as well. We are a company that likes to ship early and often. We were in a little bit of an awkward phase because we knew we were changing our pricing. So every time we got on a call with a customer, like, oh, yeah, the pricing on the website, like that's not what it's going to be. So we wanted to get it out there. And we have a list of follow-on things there. And a cap is definitely one of those.
Absolutely. Did y'all have anything else y'all wanted to talk about on the pricing front? We also have our second topic that we need to get to at some point.
I'm ready for the second topic, but what about you, Dylan?
I think I'll just close it out with this is just pricing is really complicated. I would say this is probably one of the most complicated, large undertakings I've personally worked on. I've worked on a lot of really complex software, like platforms that dynamically generate OS builds. That was easier than working on pricing. So there's going to be things that aren't perfect. There's use cases we haven't thought of, edge cases we haven't thought of. We've had a couple of questions already about what if I want to send an image, like a picture, through Goliath. So just talk to us, and it'll help us. This wouldn't be necessarily an exception for you. And I think that's against transparent pricing. Talking to us about what it says volume discounts on our pricing page is about helping us to identify the edge cases that we're not solving for yet, to help us build effectively the framework and the future iterations that hopefully accommodate more and more use cases, high bandwidth use cases, things like that.
Absolutely. Features to come. Should be a lot of fun. Well, thanks for outlining all of that, Dylan, and thanks for your input, Mike. So Dylan's kind of the pricing expert here, but Mike is an expert in another topic that was also very relevant this week. Mike, do you want to tell us a little about something else that took place this week?
Yeah, so I unfortunately couldn't go to see Dune on the fans only IMAX previews that happened 5 days before the actual launch, but I did get to IMAX on Sunday and I really liked it. I've talked to a lot of people about it, and I talked to a friend of mine who's very skeptical about the differences from the book. And I would be willing to talk about some of those differences as long as we give a spoiler warning to people.
I think we can talk about spoiler. You've seen it, right, Dylan? Just making sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I think everyone in Goliath has seen it now. I think that was actually written into our employee contracts. But no, I feel like we can say spoilers incoming. We've talked about pricing. We're 48 minutes and 45 seconds into the show. If you listen past this point, it's at your own peril here. Mike?
Yeah, I think the really big things in this movie that were different. So first of all, I think the filmmaking is amazing. I really liked the way that the story was told. It's a little bit hokey unless you're a super fan, and I think that's fine as well. But all in all, great ability to tell this story. And I think splitting the movie into was smart. Or sorry, splitting the first book, Frank Herbert's Dune, into was really smart. Yeah, spoilers incoming. There you go. But the first movie I thought very closely mirrored the book, and the second movie had many departures from it. So for instance, Alia, Paul's sister, Jessica's daughter, was multiple years old by the time the showdown with the Emperor happened. But in the movie, the baby's not yet born. And I think Dan even mentioned the timeline of the movie itself doesn't make sense for like a 9-month wait for the baby to come. Like, so less than 9 months have happened between the time that that Leto Atreides has been killed and Erskine overthrown to the time when Paul takes Irulan as his princess, I guess, or queen. Like, that doesn't work out at all. I thought like the jihad, which is used in the book but not in the movie, the holy war happening immediately, like while they're still in the throne room, and people are like just jumping on ships and going into space, was like very suspect. I kind of liked it that they made Jessica and Paul have strife between the two of them, but in the book they are very closely aligned. Like they always talk about all these political factions and these plans within plans. Like, that's a very big departure, and possibly the biggest one of all is that in the movie, Paul didn't tell Chani what he was going to do as far as taking Irulan as his bride because of the politics of it. But in the book, he's very clear about it and says, like, I'm married to you. My heart belongs to you. We are Fremen. But for this political dynasty thing, I'm going to take Irulan, and she will be no more than a concubine to me. This is political. And like, that was totally missing. Completely changes the dynamic between Paul and Chani, and it's a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing that, like, the idea that in the book that like Chani isn't like super skeptical of all of it, and like there's a lot of tension between them. That's like, I feel like that's like the main plot of the second. So I haven't read the book for everyone there. I haven't read any of the books. So like I walk away from that and I'm like, what was that? Well, I walked away from it. That movie was about a lot of things, right? And I can draw like lots of parallels, and we could talk about this for a very long time. I also, viewing into my personal life a little bit, am frequently around lots of graduate divinity students, which I watched this movie with. So that was the discussion, contained multitudes. But I walked, like, a major part of the movie was like the strife between them, and like, that he was kind of like a fake Fremen. And I mean, I assume she's like skeptical in the book of like him being a Fremen still, right? Or is that still mostly just the movie?
Such a time period goes by that I think that there's a lot more acceptance.
Okay. Wait, from when the Harkonnens like come and destroy House Atreides to like when they go take the Emperor comes to Arrakis at the end of the movie, how much time is between those two in the book?
I'd say at least 6 years.
Oh my gosh. It feels like in the book, in the movie, it is definitely less than 9 months, right? Because the baby isn't born. So
yeah,
which is wild.
I also didn't read the books, but I found her saltiness to be like a little bit surprised. I was like, why is she so salty? Like, she's the one that told him to go to the south when he was saying, I don't want to. And then she was like, oh, yeah, pissed off the rest of the time. But I found it like a little bit, like, I didn't really understand how that happened. But
so not only is Alia born, Jessica's daughter, Paul's sister, is born in the book, but Chani and Paul have a son. And then the son is, I think, in the south at a siege, and the Harkonnen are still using Sardaukar troops from the Emperor, and the Sardaukar raid the siege and kill his son. And so, it's been a couple of maybe 2 years since I read it last. But I want to say, like, that's one of the triggers. They show in the movie, like, Paul sees all these terrible things coming, and he's really trying not to, like, take the water of life and become the Liaison al-Gaib and lead everyone. But I think the last straw is, like, they're killing our children. Like, they're invading our societies. They're doing bad things. And so this cannot stand.
Yeah. Which makes, like, it does feel like so I get your point, Dylan, of like, she seems pretty salty after like encouraging him to do that. Although I will say, like, he goes in the movie, especially because it is a compressed time frame, he goes like 0 to 100 from like, he's like, I like, you should be led by Fremen. Like, I believe this so strongly. I just am like endearing myself to you, to then like, I
am your leader.
Yeah, exactly. He like walks in and he's like, someone like, I'll kill anyone who like doesn't want to follow me. And you're like, whoa, like, how did we get here? But in my mind, like, which I think a lot of this is, I was telling Mike and Sam this when we converted firmware office hours to Dune office hours earlier this week, that that like I felt myself the whole movie being like trying to like rationalize anything that Paul did, or a number of characters, but especially Paul, right? Because he's the main person. And like at that moment though, where he is, basically like, I'm your leader, and he's like yelling and all the people are around or whatever, and then he like starts telling them things about them, and they're like, oh yeah, you're our savior. That's where like it like fell apart. I was like, I don't have it anymore. I've lost it. I can't rationalize this, except for that. And I think Mike, you and Sam also kind of articulated this when we were talking, is like he thinks that's the only option to avoid like everything being destroyed and all of these like horrors. So he like has to do it. He doesn't necessarily like want to, or doesn't necessarily just become like super power hungry.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's difficult to the movie doesn't explain really deeply. Like a couple things. There were no guild navigators in this. So like this whole thing about why Arrakis is so important, why the spice is so important, and how much power Paul has. Because in the book, like he buries bombs with water next to them. And as you saw, if you put the worms in water, they die. And the worms are the source of spice. And so the guild navigators they have prescience, and they can see where the bombs are, and they can see that if they go in a certain path, there's no future ahead of it. There's just a dark hole in the future, and that horrifies them. So they put political pressure on the emperor to go through with the wedding between Irulan and Paul. So there's like stuff like that. But the other thing is like the Kwisatz Haderach is the Bene Gesserit pass their consciousness through their entire female line, but they can't look at any of the male line. And this extreme galaxy's perfect being, the Kwisatz Haderach, is going to be able to see both lines, male and female. And so that and I guess has prescience. I don't know if that was part of the forecast thing, but like that's how he can look at people and tell them like what they're thinking and stuff, is because he can just see that timeline ahead of time. And with pretty good, I mean, he can see, it's like, branching, so you can see certain ways that you should go through it. But so I think that part of it, because the book's, I don't know, 800 pages, something like that. It's like there's just so much time to explain things in the book that there weren't in the movie. But maybe what we should talk about is the cinematography, because I was really struck with that. What did you guys think of that, Dylan? Any thoughts?
My first caveat is that for some reason the way my brain works is I don't really remember movies for a very long time. I watch them and enjoy them, and I really enjoyed. I thought it was fantastic. But in like a couple months, I won't remember like anything that happened. It's probably because there's
that's actually really handy
involved.
You can like just keep enjoying them over and over again.
Yeah, I'm not actively scheming while watching, so it like falls on my brain. But I thought it was fantastic. Like I was reading something. The black and white portion was like infrared cameras, right? Something like that.
Oh, interesting.
You mean like with the Harkonnens? You mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was meant to show like the bright sunlight, like creating an absence of color, something along those lines.
That's
I read the headline, the cliff notes of an article about it.
The Harkonnens, like, they did an excellent job. I didn't like it, but they did such a good job of making them seem so evil. Because like I was just deeply uncomfortable the whole time. Like it was on, what is it? It's Gidi Prime. Is that the name?
That's right.
Yeah. Like everything shot there. I was just like, I feel bad. I want to get out of here. Like these people are really, really sick. And so I think mission accomplished maybe there for them. So, but they were truly pretty sinister. But that was another thing I heard, that in the book, they're like kind of even worse than they're depicted in the movie.
They're pretty bad in the book. And I think I expected it to be dirty. Like in the book, they talk about the pollution. It's an industrialized planet, like through and through. And so it was a lot cleaner in the movie, but I couldn't have been more happy. Like it just keeps you off balance the entire time. Some of I already mentioned this in our other talk, but like the Bene Gesserit are coming through this hallway in Gidi Prime to where the Colosseum is, and they're black, they're silhouetted, and Bene Gesserits are usually wearing black garb, but then they like come out into the light and they're actually wearing white, and they're like some of the only people that are wearing white in there, and like it's playing into this thought of like they are actually going to try and take control of this terrible house and like guide it so that it doesn't just like roll over the whole universe in a destructive way. And I think that's an interesting one. Like the sisterhood played a really interesting role in the second movie. Like Irulan is like aghast about the sisterhood pushing the emperor to overthrow the Atreides, but then they're like, we, you know, basically says like we have multiple plans. Like this is all just controlling things without being the ones in power, and that felt very neat.
Yeah, Mike, was it you that was telling me that? I think it was you. I can't remember if it was you or someone else, but kind of like talking about, because I was confused about like why don't they just like take control, right? The Bene Gesserit, because like why don't they just use the voice all the time? But if it was you who was telling me this, that they're like more, they view themselves as like stewards of like bringing forward what's to come, not like we're just like trying to have control over everything, which does provide some justification. I guess there's also perhaps like if you want to make an analogy to like the Force, it's like this, maybe the voice like exists, right? And you can channel it when it decides you can, kind of.
Yeah.
So
well,
I don't
some
know.
people are trained to resist the voice. Like I think that's one of the things that Bene Gesserit sometimes do for the houses that they work for. So I'm sure there's a point at which you overuse it and it doesn't have its effectiveness anymore. But I think it's more of their existence as an organization that has like they have the ability to do truth saying, they call it, you know, like telling if someone's telling the truth or not. And so like every great house has a truth sayer. So like there's a Bene Gesserit stationed with each center of power on every planet throughout the Imperium. And then they're usually training, especially daughters. So like Irulan is the Emperor's daughter, but she's an acolyte of the Bene Gesserit. And then that gives them cross purposes, right? So the acolytes end up having a stronger affinity to the Bene Gesserit. And so like they are really like pulling the strings. And then it's to the point of like, I think they have amazing powers to seduce people. And that's, I think, what they did with Fade Rautha, or I think it was Fade Rautha in that movie. And in order to carry the bloodline on, because they're trying to figure out DNA traits gene traits that would lead to the supreme being. So the other thing is, if you want true power, you need a stooge, right? And so like they stay in the background, and they, you didn't see the Bene Gesserit get wiped out on Arrakis. That was the Atreides.
Right. You're making some good points.
I really loved the scale of these movies. Unlike the David Lynch or the sci-fi miniseries about these movies, like Denny really did an amazing thing with scope. And I saw the first one an IMAX, and then I went like the next day and watched it on TV, like HBO Max. And there's just so much that you don't see on the small screen, because it's like this big, but when you get it onto the large screen, it's there. And that was true of this movie too. Like from like the size of the arena, the Colosseum of the arena, and the size of the worms when you're running, but also like there's this really great ability to show the scope of the planet. Like when they go through the storms to the southern part of the planet, the desert is a different type of desert. It's like dark volcanic rock desert. It's not that like amber fine grained Sahara type of desert of the north. And I haven't really seen anyone else do that. But to me, it immediately gave me this scale of like, oh, they're in a complete, like a different continent of this planet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The first time I watched the first movie, I hated it, which is weird because I really love science fiction. And the reason why I hated it, though, is I watched it on a transatlantic flight on like the little screen with the airline provided earbuds. And so I literally didn't know what anyone was saying. And there's like a lot to digest, right?
Yeah.
in this movie. And so I watched this movie and I was like, this is dumb. Like, why does anyone like this? Nothing happened in the whole movie. And like the stuff that did happen, none of it was explained. So like, I just need to go read the book now or whatever. And I didn't watch it again until last Friday before I went to go see the new one. And I watched it and I was like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So, so word to the wise, don't take your airplane viewing experience on a, like iPhone size screen as the, I mean, it was worse than an iPhone because the screen was not as nice, but so that definitely skewed my view. Although I will say rewatching the first one, like it was 2 days, I guess, before I watched the second one. I think that's the way to do it. Like, so that you have, a coherent picture.
Yeah. I also watched the first one again. Cause like I said, I don't remember movies very well. I was like, yeah, I know there's something about like this sand type thing. And Amy, my wife, was like, the whole planet is sand. And I'm like, no, there was like some kind of like currency. And I was like, the spice. And then I remembered everything once I started watching it again, though.
I remember when I watched it the first time, when I watched the first one the second time, I realized that I just like didn't take in the Bene Gesserit at all the first time I watched the movie, which like is pretty foundational, right, to understanding what's happening. I just thought like when the like Bene Gesserit leader woman comes and like tests Paul, I was just like, that was weird. And then like, just like didn't consider anything else about it. And then I realized, I was like, oh, the mom is this, and now he's it. And also the part, I just like wrote off the part about when she actually, this is ridiculous. In the first one where Paul like gets up and comes to breakfast and the mom is like, he's like, can you pass the water? And she's like, use the voice. And he's like, I just woke up. And she's like, do it. And then he just like, because they don't use the voice that much in that movie. And then he's just like, pass me the water. What is going on? Like, why are you being so rude to your mom? This is weird. But,
oh my gosh, I love that perspective. I think you will eat the book up if you read the book now. It's I like it because it's so political intrigue. Like there's so many plans and counter plans, and everyone's trying to pull one over on the other people, and they're all scheming. Damn, Dylan, you might like the scheming part of it.
Maybe I'll have to try to read it. I will say I've never gotten through an 800-page book before.
If you can make it through the first 500 pages, you will be hooked.
I don't think I've gotten through a 500-page book before.
I read this one on vacation. This is like 937 pages. I don't know if you've read Neil Stephenson, but he can't write a book that doesn't bump up against 1,000 pages.
I'm more of a it's partly time and also partly I think just like how I like to take in information. I'm more of an audiobook kind of guy, which that counts. So maybe I'll listen to Dune on audio. It's a lot of runs. Cool. Well, I would love to continue this conversation. I do at the jump. You are welcome to stay, of course, but we're also over an hour, so I'm happy to wrap up if y'all are satisfied with the state of our Dune recap and pricing recap, of course.
I'm satisfied. I think you and I are on the same call that's coming up, and I imagine you have to prepare.
That's correct, and I am not prepared, so I'm going to go do that. But Mike, Dylan, it's great to hang out with y'all. Thanks for y'all's insight and a good chat.
Yeah, it was fun. Let's do it again.
All right. Have a good weekend, y'all.
Bye, guys.
See ya.